I oppose CA7, CA13, and CA16, which would lead to the defunding and debilitation of the PONC program. No amount of greenwashing will make them any better. Please do not pass any of these measures, no matter how much you've been pressured. Instead, please listen to the expressed will of the people of this county. They have been speaking unequivocally for years. Each of these three proposals would return the PONC program to the county code from its safe haven in the charter. The public placed it in the charter to be free of the demonstrated defunding by the administration and council branches of county government. If moved back to the code, the PONC and maintenance funds will be vulnerable to administrative and council shenanigans. Promised budget funding will be just as vulnerable to diversion and defunding as it was before the PONC funding was protected by charter placement, despite the lofty wording of CA16. In addition, CA7 removes a restrictive covenant on PONC-acquired property interests, eliminating the likelihood of matching funds from other sources, and it also removes the directive that the highest and best use of the PONC fund is for attracting matching funds to amplify its effectiveness. The purpose of any and all of these three proposals is to gut the PONC program. If you vote in favor of these, it will be clear to the public of your intent. At the end of your last meeting, you were left so tongue-tied and twisted with interdigitating amendments that discussed two proposed charter amendments simultaneously that it was unclear to witnesses what emerged at all or where from. Basically, a few members are trying to put lipstick on a pig and to try to greenwash the planned demise of the PONC program. If you would do better to stick to the script or vote from the heart. If you support the PONC program, vote for CA9 and CA18 and not for CA7, CA13, and CA16. Be sure they are roll call votes.
All right, so item number 2 is communication number 21.55, which purpose of which is transmitting Charter Amendment 7, Draft 2 for first reading. Proposal to amend sections 1015 and 1016 by repealing and replacing provisions for the Public Access, Open Space, and Natural Resources Preservation Fund and Maintenance Fund, respectively, as submitted by Commissioner Hamano. And underneath, that was postponed at our last regular meeting, January 25th. You'll note that there is a note that there's a motion on the floor made by Commissioner Hamano and seconded by Commissioner Adams to pass CA7 Draft 2 on first reading. I would note that actually there is actually amendment. We stand right now with an amendment where we have it's the amendment by Commissioner Todd and seconded by Commissioner Hopkins, which essentially, without going through the entire amendment, added changed the amount to 2% for the preservation fund, maintaining the 0.25 for the maintenance fund, along with some other items in there. But that essentially is the amendment. And so we're within that amendment at the moment in by the process of reconsideration at the last meeting.
The acquisition fund would be 2%, the maintenance fund would be 0.25%, and the paragraph about suspension of the fund is repealed entirely. And that's the amendment in its heart, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You know, one of the main purposes behind the CA7 as amended was to lower the mandated percentage rate that goes into the PONC fund from 2% to a total of 1%. I would respectfully remind my fellow commissioners that we passed for initial approval CA7 as amended, which among other things lowered the PONC percentage rate. Now, many members of the commission made clear that while they personally did not want the PONC percentage rate lowered, that they still would vote in favor of CA7 as amended to allow the voters of the County of Hawaii to decide for themselves. Now, this new amendment to CA7 would put back the same PONC percentage rate that we now have, that would not allow the voters to decide whether a lower amount is their wish. Now, I agree with the testimony which expounds on the benefits of the PONC program that affords the people in the county of Hawaii. And I agree that we should do whatever we can to strengthen the PONC program. However, while the PONC fund set aside of 2% or over $6 million is relatively small to all of the other budgetary needs of the county, this mandatory set-aside is guaranteeing a budget amount for a special interest project without any council input or debate when there are budgetary needs in the county having far greater priority. An over $6 million guarantee ties the hands of the county council where they may have to cut budgets for road work, public safety, Puna disaster relief, and the many other community service organizations that depend on county funding. To say that this 2% amount, which will, if in the charter, would be a mandatory budget amount, that this does not negatively affect other higher priority county programs would be wrong. It is the county council that is charged with prioritizing where county funds should be spent, where they have debate and public input, and the right of the public to vote members out should they disagree with budgetary policies. The council needs the flexibility to determine budgetary needs on a yearly basis without their hands being tied by a mandatory budget set-aside that is nowhere else in the charter. So the bottom line, I believe, is really, while we have a spirited debate about how much is too much for the mandatory PONC fund, we nevertheless should allow the voters to decide this charter question. I ask that we not take away the public's right to vote on this very important charter amendment.
After the last meeting we had and listening to Tony Withington and Mr. Fujima from North Kohala, it took me back 35, 40 years after I moved here from Honolulu. And we used to go hike along the coastline there, camp. Hotels weren't there except Mauna Kea. Now, the Mauna Lani, we go camping in Mauna Lani before there's any hotel there. Now you can't even hike along the coastline. I'd go surfing with my boys there in front of the Mauna Lani, and the security come and kick us out of the water. So I realize, yes, it's conservation, but as someone commented here, you can do away with that and put hotels up and keep people away from the ocean, period, or along the coastline. So although I don't think you can make this amendment, because I think it's against the rules of Robert's Rules of Order, I agree to leave the PONC fund the way it was at 2%. Thank you.
I will vote yes on this amendment, which is Commissioner Lighthead Todd's amendment to increase the amount of money back up. But in my opinion, it's putting a patch on CA7, which is, as Commissioner Hamano has said, was not the intent of it. I think that we have a perfectly good piece of amendment in CA9, and that CA7 probably should stand on its own 2 feet at the original amount of money that was put in it. But, as I say, I will vote for this amendment. Thank you.
I agree with Commissioner Rice. I would be voting on the amendment, but I feel that it wasn't the intent of the original of CA7. So I think it's better to in sort of recognizing that intent, I would vote against the CA7.
Everybody got it? All right. Mr. Hendricks, please roll call vote.
Mr. Bergen. Ms. Galimba. Mr. Hamano. Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Ms. Leadhead Todd. Ms. Rice.
Yes.
Mr. Rohrig.
Yes.
Ms. Saking. Ms. Springer.
Yes.
Ms. Selko Schluter.
No.
Chair Adams.
No.
Chair Adams, you have 5 votes in favor.
All right, motion fails. So where we are now is that we are back in the regular motion.
I would refer to Director Yee's comments made to our commission that while we did have spirited, positive debate that did not want to lower the PONC mandatory amount from 2% to 1%, I think there is a vast, at least equally silent majority that, would want, fiscal responsibility to be placed with the county council and the, finance director and, to have them prioritize and decide, what is the correct amount. Now, it still, authorizes a mandatory 1% amount, which is, about $3 million. So, again, since the amount right now is 2%, and the proposal here is to lower it to 1%, again, I say we allow this to go forward, and we allow the public to decide, whether they wish to maintain the 2% or whether they wish to lower it to 1%.
I will vote no on CA7 Draft 2 because, in my opinion, it shortchanges our children and our grandchildren by severely decreasing our opportunity to keep and restore our island's irreplaceable lands. And we have a very complete and good piece of amendment in CA9.
I also will be voting no surprise there, but I just wanted to make a few comments. One of them, of course, is to note that we got quite a few emails from students over the last few days, and I have to admit, I was crying because it was so beautiful to have those kids having that kind of connection to their island, their Aina, and their place. It's an investment, to have that kind of care for the environment, and we need that so badly because we're going to places where that's just going to be priceless. So to me, this fund is very well spent. It's a huge investment on things that you can't see but are just priceless. And I also wanted to recall something that the testifier Gail Burns mentioned, which was the rural economic development that this fund creates, especially in the rural areas outside of Hilo, like Ka'u. It's huge to have this fund to help our communities. That's all.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hamano speaks to reality and the ability of our county leadership to be able to have the flexibility to respond to the matter-of-fact and frank situation that this island is in financially. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not getting emotional, but a day doesn't go by where I don't say a prayer for everybody in Puna for what they've been through. I put myself in their position of no longer having a home or even the access to what was my home. These are extraordinary times. In extraordinary times, we have to take an extraordinary degree of flexibility in how we look at how our county will weather this storm, granted the state, granted the federal. This is huge. On the other hand, I will speak to the fact that we've had many, many points of testimony. And I made it a habit to read them. Unfortunately, many of them were repetitive, and they kept with the same misspelling mistakes, so I carried on with the realization that that was just a copy of it. Nevertheless, people took the time to submit it. But until Fred Cachola came along, for the first time did we ever hear someone point to the very, very ancient findings of old Hawaii and how badly they need to be preserved. And it's not just true of North Kohala. It's true of all of the islands. And this opportunity would be one that would be empowered to focus on preservation of many of those artifacts and findings. That's the first I heard of this PONC dedication being toward specific cultural target areas. And I was very moved by that. At the end of the day, I want to keep listening. I'm not ready to make a decision. I'm troubled between both sides of the affair, the fiscal responsibility of our county leadership and the fact that PONC is motherhood and apple pie. We all want that. Can our county continue to help repair the position we're in without some greater degree of financial flexibility? Thank you.
I will be voting no on this one. I respect the will of the people that has been demonstrated numerous times already at the ballot box. The assumption that the only way the county can respond to financial emergencies is to raid the PONC fund, I find basically ridiculous. We have so many other areas of the county that, in my opinion, are badly managed. We pay way too much for certain other things that the county cannot find even 1% of their budget in savings in other parts of the county. Instead, we have to go raid PONC. Like I said, I find it to be ridiculous. And I do understand and I appreciate all the work that the other commissioners who propose this, Commissioner Romano and the other one on this one here. I think from my personal viewpoint, gentlemen, you were fed a bill of goods by the mayor. And I strongly disagree with that. So again, I'm going to be voting no against this.
I think that Commissioner Bergen probably stated as well as anybody has kind of how I'm feeling about this charter amendment at the moment. But I have a few other thoughts in my and perspectives on this that haven't necessarily been stated, but perhaps other commissioners have as well. When I accepted the appointment to this particular commission, I saw it as an opportunity to review our foundation document, which is something that we do on a decade basis, and to do it in a way, as I think I mentioned at our first meeting, that allows us to look out into the future. It's not something that, councils are supposed to look into the future, mayors are supposed to look into the future. I think that planning director, you identified that, and we know that members of the public are doing that as well. But we have the mission to study government operations and to do it with an eye to where we think this county will be, and this island will be, and this state will be, down the line. And to try and provide that organizational infrastructure, which is what this document is, to do that. And so I have a natural there's a natural proclivity I have for allowing the electors in our county to have the power. And because the council members are the ones that are their representatives, I like to try and provide those folks with as much of the power as they should have. So I like to see a charter that is succinct, that is streamlined, that then allows the council to do what it needs to do in providing policy on a daily basis and on a monthly and yearly basis. At the same time, charters are supposed to be setting that structure. So where do I fit this? Where do I say the importance? Because nobody denies. I think it's important to say nobody denies the importance of providing open space, providing preservation services for the environment, for the lands that are here on this island. I've had plenty of people say to me, we don't like the idea that there's all this money that the charter is requiring be put into this fund. And yet at the same time, they're saying, but make sure you understand, I completely agree with the idea that we need to be protecting our land. It's a very interesting dichotomy of conversations that we hear. Nobody is saying that that's not a priority. The question is, where does it fit in all of the priorities that we have? And so if we put it into the charter, we are saying, and by we I mean the voters, are saying that we want to take it out of the hands of our elected representatives. It doesn't mean they don't trust them. It means that it's important enough that that becomes one of those things that it's just one of those priorities that we're going to set us, that's going to be more important than anything else that we might come up with, or at least on an equal measure with any of the other priorities that we've listed in the charter. And the council can't do anything about it. And so I've not yet come to a place in my mind, a sense in my mind where I am sure of that. I know that there are many things that can happen. Heck, we of course have seen that just in the last 8 months, where things can happen, and we're asking our public servants to take care of those things for us and in partnership with us. So all of that is to say I don't know where I'm at, because I think that there's a variety of things that are important to me when I'm considering this. And as a result, I won't necessarily go as far probably as Commissioner Hamano in saying that it needs to be put before the voters. But I think I will say that I'd like to hear in the public hearings around the island what people think about the variety of options that we have before us. And so that will be that will be my view on how that kind of works. I mean, Commissioner Hamano's right. We have other charter amendments, other proposals that are going to come up in front of us. And so, summarize, Adams. I think that how those all come out, it's going to be important to. I'd like to hear how folks feel about those as well as this particular amendment. Commissioner Zelko.
As I was preparing for the meeting today, and I was looking back over the minutes and thinking about this specific amendment, and really to add to what Commissioner Bergen said, I do think there is a reality, and I think we face it in our own homes. I was having lunch with some girlfriends, and we were talking about college funds for our children, and how much maybe the financial advisors tell us to put in. And the reality is I would like to put more in for their futures, because I think education is so important. But I have a reality, and it is my budget. And, things happen. My daughter had to have surgery last year, and it affects the budget. And I do think when there are emergencies, and not even really in times of emergencies, but just the reality of the world we're living in now. Because one of my concerns is safety in this community. I grew up in Hilo. It is not the Hilo that I remember. And so I'm conflicted because it's just I am conflicted. I do think there is a reality that we have to live in. And, preserving open spaces is very important to me. I plan on living out my life here. I would like my children to live out theirs, and so just wanted to add that.
Thank you. There is no other discussion. Then let's have a roll call vote on the motion.
Mr. Bergen. Yes. Ms. Galimba. No. Mr. Hamano. Yes. Mr. Hopkins.
No.
Ms. Leadhead Todd. Ms. Rice.
No.
Mr. Rohrig.
No.
Ms. Saking. Ms. Springer.
No.
Ms. Zelko Schluter.
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Yes.
Chair Adams, you have 4 votes in favor.
The motion fails for lack of a majority. The vote would have been 4 to 5.
Correct, with 2
And we
absent.
required 6 to
6 to pass it on
pass
first
it
reading.
on first reading.